Hi, so I will be quickly showing you how to use the Ormuco DevOps tool to create your own CI/CD system to automate the build, test, and deployment of your application. So clicking on DevOps tools, here we'll see that we require a bunch of components that need to be set up beforehand. I thankfully did that before the demo. We have my Kubernetes cluster here with one master and one minion. Minion master. In Cube, I have Sonar Cube and the Docker registry. And for the GitLab component, I'm just going to be using public GitLab, which is not really recommended for your own CI/CD system, but for the purposes of your demo, this is acceptable. So part of the reason is having your own GitLab is going to give you much more control on how you want to automate your system and how much resources you can give to the CI/CD process. We have your Docker registries already set in this IP. Kube config, typically you would get that from Kubernetes. Go to the cluster details and then access. This is to be able to use your kubectl CLI to administrate your Kubernetes cluster. And Sonar Cube is deployed also in the Cube VM port 9000 GitLab. I'm just going to be using public GitLab. So URL here 5000, and Sonar Cube is going to be this 9000. kubectl is going to be for kube config. GitLab is typically HTTPS gitlab.com. Project name, create a new project. And then private token, there's instructions here on how to create a private token. So typically, a new project would look like this. This is a template for your CI/CD system. Again, this requires some knowledge of what you're doing. It's not completely set to work out of the box right away. It will require some very brief and small modifications to connect the pieces together. However, all the templates are created that are going to facilitate the whole process. So GitLab CI.yml is really where the automation happens. You have the stages: build, release, and deploy. Uses your Docker registry, but first pulls from registry if there's an image available, tries to build, and during the build process is when Sonar Cube is going to be used to inspect the code, and if all is well, it's going to be pushed to registry, which is then retagged and deployed as a Kubernetes cluster. Docker file is going to be dependent on your application. Typically we have a template over here, but you will need to do a bit more modifications to make sure that the right image and the right language and so forth is being used in this whole process for the Docker image building. Typically you would put your actual application in source. Over here we have a template application called app.js. Finally, Sonar project.properties, probably not going to need to modify this, but this is what's going to be used by Sonar Cube for the code inspection. And over here, I actually have another project created and working from the template that is already configured to have the CI/CD system working. So we have a simple application of Hello World in Java. What it does is in port 8080, when there's a connection to it, it just prints goodbye world and then closes the socket. So let's see what the other files look like for me. So following the instructions here, I first had to make sure that I have root access to the Kubernetes master node, that the Kubernetes nodes all have the Docker registry placeholder simply to ensure that Kubernetes node can access the insecure registry. This step is not going to be required if you're using a secure Docker registry. Other variables that I need to set in some files include Docker registry, container port, and external port, and make sure that your Docker file is good. And finally, Sonar project properties is not much is going to be required there, but you may need to modify it depending on your application. So what we really need to consider is the Docker file in this case. So my Docker file looks something like this. Instead, as you can see here in the template Docker file, every time you run the program, you're going to be grabbing the SonarQube packages and running SonarQube and then deleting SonarQube. So what I had set here is create a package with already all the dependencies that we need to speed up the whole build process. So SonarQube is already set here. Java JDK is also in the image, so that way we're just in the build process, everything is a lot faster. So we create the working there, and then we compile the code hello world after copying it from the outside directory, and we run SonarQube, we remove SonarQube, expose the port, and after compiling, when we run containers, we want the containers to run with this command, Java run hello world. And that's about it for my CI/CD system. One more modification that I had to do is Sonar project properties. I needed to add the Sonar language to be Java. And then for every commit after that, GitLab detects that you have a .gitlab.ci, and the whole system is then triggered to do the build, release, and deploy. So I have my last deployment was 11 hours ago. Build passed, release passed, deploy passed. We can quickly skim through the logs to see exactly what GitLab did here. So starting here, it first tried to pull the image, which was existing, and finally try to build the image. We can see here the steps exactly of what it takes. Tries to run SonarQube. We see in the end that SonarQube execution is a success. Remove SonarQube, expose the port, and set the Java command for the running containers. And then we have the release process, so we're just going to skip that because the release is retagging the test image to release image. And then finally we have the deployment process, which deploys to the Kubernetes cluster. And then, since this application will be deployed on the minion, we should be able to just take this public IP and connect to the required socket. It's going to be port 3000, not port 8080, because in the configurations here we have service.yml where the port is exposed is port 8080 inside the container, but externally it's going to be port 30,000. So we connect to that port 30,000, we get a goodbye world, and so we can see that our application is already working. This is probably not going to work on your browser just because it's not a properly formatted HTTP or HTTPS response. It's just plain text goodbye world, so your browser is probably not going to be able to interpret it and give some sort of error. And this is it for CI/CD system. Having it deployed within minutes is really the goal here, to be able to streamline your application development and ensure that you have a robust system to test and deploy your application. And that'll be all. Thank you very much.